Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Beth Chats Books. So today I am going to do a small TBR of possible non-fiction November reads that I might try and splice into my reading this month when I've got some time. So I've just come back from a walk, so that's why I'm a little bit rosy cheeked, but I thought it's quite quiet in the house, so I'll get this video done while I can. So obviously it's non-fiction November this month, and I know a lot of people have done quite big TBRs for non-fiction November, but I know Olive over at A Book Olive has been doing the non-fiction November project for a good few years now. And she does have a few prompts that she does every year, I think around 4 prompts, and I know one of the words is movement. It's 4 words, and then people can bounce off those words to make non-fiction recommendation reads from those words. So I know movement and buzz are 2 of the words this year. I've forgotten all 4 of them. I'm not going to do the prompts this year because I have so much fiction to read at the moment. I've taken a lot of books out of the library, so I've got a very fiction heavy TBR this month that I need to get round to reading. So instead I am just going to show you a few non-fiction reads. I've picked 5 that I really want to get round to reading anyway, so hopefully if I've got a bit of free time this month I can try and add them in to my reading. So the first one I want to talk about is When Dogs Don't Bark by Professor Angela Gallup. So my dad bought this from a bookshop a few months ago and he's very recently finished it, and I said to him, as soon as you finished it, can you give it to me because I really want to read it. So this is a non-fiction book that has come out this year, and it's about the pathologist Angela Gallup and the history of her career in forensics. So it says a forensic scientist search for the truth on the front. And I've seen some really interesting quotes on the back. So she's a CBE and she's a forensic scientist that has been working for more than 40 years. She's helped to solve thousands of cases, and she goes through some of her most famous cases in this book and talks about how you can exonerate people based on evidence and miscarriages of justice. It says that she deals with cases like the death of Stephen Lawrence in here, which is a very famous British crime case, and how the police handled it very badly, and how there was a lot of issue with racism and police brutality and institutional racism from that case. So it is quite infamous in the British lens, that case. And there's a few others here that it talks about. So I'm really excited to read this because I'm really interested in true crime and forensics and psychology and criminology and all those bag of tricks. I think I'll really enjoy this one, so I want to get to this very, very soon. Then I also have Midnight in Chernobyl by Adam Higginbotham. Now this was on the BookTube Prize non-fiction list this year. It didn't make it to the finals, but I know that so many people really enjoyed this book. I gave this to my dad to read recently because he wanted to read another non-fiction, because he doesn't really read fiction, he reads non-fiction and memoir. And he said this was fantastic. It is quite lengthy, but it's one that's been on my radar for the past few months, and once I've cleared my TBR, it's right up there on the reading that I want to get to. It's very close to the page, but obviously it's doing the history of the Chernobyl disaster and what happened, and my dad said it goes into quite a lot of detail about the science as well, so that as a reader you are fully aware of everything and why the event happened. So it is going to be a hefty read, but one I'm really, really excited to get to. Then I have Columbine by Dave Cullen. Now I read Dave Cullen's other book, Parkland, for the BookTube Prize this year and really enjoyed it, and this was his first one. I know he has a 3rd one coming out this year, but I don't know with COVID whether that's been pushed back, the release date for that. But I know a lot more about Columbine than I did about Parkland, and a lot of people have made comparisons between the two. There was some comparisons made between this and Parkland in Parkland, but this is a non-fiction about the Columbine massacre in the US. First of its kind of school shooting, so it has this kind of notoriety about it. And Dave Cullen spent a lot of time researching. He wasn't actually there for the event, whereas with Parkland he followed the kids in real time after the shooting and what happened, And I think with Columbine, he wasn't actually there. He didn't speak directly to anybody involved, but did a bit of research and then went back and spoke to people who lived in the area and has pieced things together. But he did mention in Parkland how he got PTSD from researching Columbine. It'd be interesting to see how involved he becomes in this process, because I know with Parkland he knew the kids from Parkland and he visited them and he was more in that story, whereas this, he was more of a researcher on the outside. But this helped build Dave Cullen's career. After this event and this book was published, he mentions in Parkland he becomes a specialist on the topic of school shootings, and when another school shooting occurs on the news, they invite Dave Cullen on the panel and on the news programmes to talk about it and whether he can make any predictions or explanations or assumptions about the killer and these things. So it's really interesting. This is the very beginning of Dave Cullen's career and the very first book, so I'll be interested to see how it differs from Parkland, so I'm really excited to get to this one. And then I have The Five by Hallie Rubenhold. Now, since this has come out, it's constantly had buzz. Even in the last few weeks, I've seen videos where people have mentioned how much they enjoyed this book. And this follows the true lives of Jack the Ripper's female victims. And it goes through their lives before the murder, but it doesn't go into any detail about the murder. So what Hallie Rubenhold was trying to do with this non-fiction is right some wrongs and some badly made assumptions about the female victims of Jack the Ripper. For example, a lot of us have the assumption that the women were prostitutes, and a lot of them weren't. They were just poor, and we learn about their life choices that lead up to their deaths. And a lot of people have said this is fantastic. I'm really happy that this narrative is out there, that this is a book that doesn't deal with Jack the Ripper himself or his murders or speculating on who he might be. This is purely about the women and not about the murders. So I think it's a really interesting angle. I know that the actual author, she's mentioned on a few podcasts, she got a lot of hate and a lot of social media abuse because a lot of people who are fascinated with Jack the Ripper didn't like how she dealt with this book. And it was a really interesting podcast. I forgot where it was, which podcast I was listening to, and she went into a lot of detail about how these people were not very happy, and the reception from a lot of people who are interested in Jack the Ripper and research into him didn't give this a great reception. But for someone like me who's really interested in these women's lives and piecing together who they were as people and not just as victims, this is going to be really interesting. And I've heard so much buzz, and lots of people who I really respect their reading tastes and them as booktubers and them as book lovers have raved about this book. So I really need to get to it because it's been around a little bit of a while now. So I want to get to that. And then the last book I want to get to is The Trial of Lizzie Borden, a true story by Cara Robertson. Now, this has been on my bookshelves for a while now. I know there is a novel adaptation version of this story. It's fictionalized account of this true story, and I know that a lot of people really enjoyed that. I think it came out a few years ago. If anybody knows what that novel is called, please can you write it down in the comment section down below, because I really want to read that one as well. But this is a non-fiction, and it goes through the story of Lizzie Borden, who was a servant, a maid for a family that then gets killed. I always forget the specifics of this story. Okay, yeah. So Lizzie is the daughter of Andrew and Abby Borden, who were brutally hacked to death in Massachusetts in 1892. And then she gets arrested and accused of the murder of her parents. And then it goes to trial, and obviously this is going to tell me all the things I don't know about this. So I knew she got accused for a murder, I just forgot that it was her parents. So this is going to be really interesting. I know that Lizzie Borden is a figure that fascinates people. Some people believe she did it, some people don't, and it has a lot of buzz historically. And I don't know anything about it, so I want to read it so that I can do. And a lot of people said that this was a very good non-fiction. and it had a lot of praise. This is also an absolutely stunning hardback, and it does have the flaps. Oh, it's got a really nice map there as well. It's just a very well done hardback, and it's really nice to hold, and the feel of it is just lovely. So I'm really excited to get to this as well. So they're just some of the non-fiction books that I want to get around to reading. I have other non-fictions on my shelves and other non-fictions that are on lists of TBRs that I have compiled that I might either buy at some point or try and get from the library. But these are just a taste of some of the things that I might be able to squeeze in non-fiction November. If not, they will definitely go on my December TBR, but obviously it won't be non-fiction November then. But I was just trying to see whether it would be possible. So please let me know down in the comments down below what books you are reading for non-fiction November, because this year I have loved reading non-fiction, and this has been a really successful year for me with non-fiction. I've read a lot more than in previous years and thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's really opened my eyes up to the possibility of non-fiction. So I would love to know what you guys are reading, and if there's anything else that I should be putting on future non-fiction recommendation lists for myself. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.